Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're devoting today's program to a detailed exposition of my major study, Obama Preparing to Attack Iran, which is posted now on Tarpley.net, 30 pages, fully documented, all kinds of references, and I urge you to take a look at it. Put that at the top of your summer reading list if you're in that position. The factors that are bringing the danger back, first of all, the failure of the Zbigniew Brzezinski project of a green movement, a subversive color revolution in Iran, essentially bringing the mullahs back to power after they've been essentially pushed out of the picture by what amounts to a military government, not really a military dictatorship, but a kind of plebiscitary military government around Ahmadinejad, with the mullahs being out and Hillary Clinton now complaining about that. Second factor, the uncertainty of Russian policy. We're told by Newsweek and some other sources that a special policy memorandum about changing Russian foreign policy has been provisionally approved by President Medvedev. It's called Program for the Effective Exploitation on a Systematic Basis of Foreign Policy Factors for the Purposes of the Long-Term Development of the Russian Federation. And the argument seems to be Russia needs the West, Europe, and the U.S. for modernization. This is what you see behind the Medvedev trip to Silicon Valley and California. And it means, therefore, an increasing propensity of the Medvedev side of the policy apparatus to pursue a conciliatory policy with the U.S. and with the NATO states, sometimes getting some concessions in return, but I'm afraid sometimes not. And therefore, we can say that there's a kind of double direction in the Russian policy. And we'll see that in just a minute. But the idea is that we can't be certain. We don't have this stern, fiercely independent Russian nationalist in the form of Putin. And I would certainly argue that Putin has been a factor, and still is, of strategic stability, in the sense that he provided a kind of deterrence, a kind of dissuasion against what the Anglo-Americans might otherwise have done. The third factor, a very big one, is certainly the financial breakdown crisis. And just look back to the 1930s, right? We've said it before. Depression leads to dictatorship and therefore to world war. We have a depression. We have all kinds of police-state tendencies, no doubt about that. Will it lead to war? Specifically, how might it? When imperialist financial elites are faced by the disintegration of their fictitious financial bubbles, they often respond with lunatic action, strategic flights forward, adventurism, and so forth. We've now seen the disintegration of the Anglo-American banking system. Now, the disintegration of the banking system in October 2008 and following caused then this $24 trillion line of credit by the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, the FDIC, to the zombie banks of Wall Street. This, of course, a tidal wave of new liquidity tends to weaken the U.S. greenback, and that's what we saw in the second half of 2009. And then we saw the counter strategy, right? We saw the Monness, Crespi, and Hart conspiratorial meeting in February of 2010, written up on Tarpley.net, with Soros, Paulson, John Paulson, Einhorn of Greenlight Capital, the famous short hedge fund artists, starting this speculative attack on the government bonds of Greece, Spain, Portugal, with the idea that that would create a crisis of the euro. So you could mask the decline of the dollar with the crisis of the euro. And we've seen that there was evidently a design for a blitzkrieg against the euro in the first months of, let's say, the spring of 2010 now, maybe May and June, for example, April, May, June, was supposed to be a blitzkrieg. It was supposed to lead to a panic flight out of the euro, the flattening of the euro, flight capital gone mad, essentially a run on the euro, parity and worse, losing 25, 30, 40% in a very short period of time. This has not materialized. Two factors have stopped it, I think. One, the vigorous countermeasures of the German government, the banning of naked credit default swaps, the first time a sovereign government has taken serious steps against the cancer of the derivatives plague. And they've also stopped naked shorts of German stocks, and I think also of the euro. Partly China supporting the euro. China not going along with the suggestions from the Financial Times of dumping the euro. So China interested in the euro, interested in investments in Greece and things like this. Result, the planned Anglo-American blitzkrieg against the euro has bogged down. It's failed. And, of course, when your blitzkrieg bogs down in the suburbs of Moscow, or even worse, the suburbs of Stalingrad, you're in an exposed position. So as long as the euro stays between $1.25 and $1.30, which is, again, where it is this week, the Anglo-American plan has failed. Now, the forces of depression remain. Those are the 1.5 quadrillion of bankrupt and kited derivatives that now find a new victim. That bankruptcy is there. That they demand loot. One way to feed the loot is to flatten Europe and feed that all into the derivatives meat grinder. But if you don't do that, it looks like it could be the yen. You can't rule it out, but probably the British pound or the U.S. dollar directly. Now, how can you solve that? Well, if you've tried attacking Europe through the means of speculation, and this was a strategic, coordinated attack. This was not the market. These were specific individuals in a conspiracy. No other word for it. The alternative is to attack in a different way, and that, of course, is this idea. We've seen it from 1973 on. The idea is that you create a war in the Middle East, a big strategic crisis in the Middle East. This tends to interfere with oil flows. 1/3 of the world's oil still comes out of the Straits of Hormuz, and if you get a crisis going in the Gulf, that hits Europe, it hits Japan, it hits China, U.S., it hits less. But above all, if you can drive up the price of oil to $500 a barrel, or $1,000 is even better, then you get a tremendous demand for dollars. The dollar overhang, this $24 trillion credit line that was extended to Wall Street, you can soak that up. It goes through Saudi Arabia, but it creates demand for dollars, and then they lend that money to New York. We've seen it before, right? The recycling of petrodollars, all this old stuff from the 1970s. The 1973 war was such a case. The Saltsjöbaden meeting in Sweden several months before had discussed a $400 rise in the price of oil. That is what then happened several months after that. So, as Jean-Michel Vernochet of the Réseau Voltaire points out in an article which I quote, this is what the Anglo-Americans are up to.